Hello. This is the training for the Vermont Commercial Building Energy Standards, also known as CBES, also known as the Vermont Energy Code. This recording is going to focus on section C405, which is the electrical power and lighting section of the commercial code. And for more information about the code update, you can go to this website on the Vermont Public Service Department's webpage. So very briefly, there were many folks and companies involved in this code update, in the code update team, as well as many stakeholders and an advisory committee that contributed to this code update. And you can see some of the companies that were involved over here. My name, under the commercial code bullet, my name is Keith Downs, and I work for Navigant Consulting, and we were under contract from the Vermont Department of Public Service. So let's head in to C405, Electrical Power and Lighting Systems. Briefly, these are the topics we are going to cover. I should point out this training is not intended for those who are new to the Energy Code. What we are going to be covering in today's recording are all the updates that are happening from the version that is currently being enforced as of this recording, which is the CBES 2015, and I'm going to go over the changes from that to the 2019 CBES, but I will not be covering the items of the code that have not changed. So these bullet points are all things that have changed since the last code release. And we will hit on all these on separate slides later, but briefly, there's new definitions we're going to go over, some requirements for dwelling units and sleeping units. We will cover lighting power density allowances for interior lighting power, for exterior lighting power. We will look at controls, manual controls, occupancy sensors, open office requirements for occupancy sensors, egress lighting controls, requirements to daylight control functions, daylight control dimming, exterior time switch control function, gas lighting pilot control, three-phase transformer requirements, general purpose motor efficiencies, voltage drop in feeders and branch circuits, and one of the bigger changes is there's a new section on electrical vehicle charging station requirements. So these definitions are actually in Chapter 2. They're not in C405, but these are ones that you might want to be aware of if you are working in the electrical power and lighting areas. Instead of just repeatedly writing out what the requirements are for high efficacy lighting, we've just made that a definition and moved it to Chapter 2. Besides moving the location of it, the definition has changed as well. Before, in the 2015 CBES, it would depend on the light output or size of the wattage, what your lumens per watt had to be, and it was graduated depending from small lights to larger lights. Now it's been tightened on what qualifies. So now it's 65 lumens per watt, and that's across all sizes. Or if you have a light fixture, an integrated fixture, that integrated fixture, it should be not less than 55 lumens per watt. There's also a definition for LLLC, luminaire lighting controls, which is a new technology that we're seeing in the marketplace now, starting to make its impact in the marketplace. If you're doing an LLLC system, you get exempted from some of the controls, and this is where we define what an LLLC is. Okay. Dwelling and sleeping units. Within Group R2, buildings shall install lamps and fixtures not less than 90% of the lamps, or not less than 90% of the permanently installed light fixtures shall be high efficacy fixtures, which we defined a little while ago. This is a change from the 2015 CBES. Not only is that a higher percentage, it used to be 75%, now it's 90%. Must be high efficacy. But instead of, it used to just apply to multifamily dwelling and sleeping units. Now it's all R2 buildings, which includes multifamily as well as dormitories and fraternities and sororities. Dwelling units within buildings other than Group 2, but they do have high efficacy lighting, are exempt from all lighting controls. So if you're not in an R2 and you have a dwelling unit, you don't have to worry about controls if you bring all your lamps, or 90%, up to high efficacy requirements. And dwelling units and sleeping units within buildings other than Group R2 with high efficacy lighting are exempt from lighting power density requirements as well. Now we're going to go into the lighting power density tables. So the way this is organized, this is the building area method tables. For sake of brevity, I'm not going to go into the space by space requirements, but the reduction percentages that you're going to see in the building area method will be similar for the space by space section. And I've got a few slides of this because there's a lot of building area types. But we have the area type defined over here. This is the current code, the 2015 CBES requirements. Our code has always been based off of the IECC model code, which is a national model code. We start with that and then make amendments to it to come up with our CBES in Vermont. There are several amendments, but that's our starting point. And just for reference, this is what the national model code was advocating for. We went beyond that because of our statewide energy reduction goals. So now you will see our lighting power densities that we're proposing in this upcoming 2019 CBES over here in the right column. I am not going to cover all of these building types. I might touch on one building type per slide, but if you want to study this, just hit pause in this recording and you can peruse it, or you can go to the proposed code on the Department of Public Services website and look at the tables there. So on this one here, if we look at, for instance, dining in a bar, lounge, or leisure area, the old code was just barely over 1 watt per square foot, and now it's been cut down to just over, 0.76 watt per square foot. Apologize for that. And similar reductions you'll see throughout. Okay, on here we've got office buildings. Might be a good one to look at. Currently it's 0.82 watts per square foot. We're proposing 0.64. This one here has retail on it. Retail 1.26 in the current code. We are proposing 0.92 for what it would go to. If you're in a retail space, there are allowances for sales areas, specifically to highlight merchandise. That has been updated. So there's an equation you go into that tells you how much beyond the lighting power density that's allowed, what additional lighting power you can put in. The additional lighting power has been cut, so you can see what the old one was with the strikeout, and the new one is there in red, so you can see what those reductions are. That got cut considerably. Now we're going to get into exterior lighting. Oh, one thing I forgot to point out when we were covering the interior lighting is some of the stakeholders had concerns about areas where there are elderly people in them. We do, in the space-by-space lighting power densities, allow for more lighting power in areas that serve the elderly. But if you're to take advantage of that, you need to do the space-by-space method, and you will find more lenient code requirements in those cases. Now we're switching to exterior lighting. If you are familiar with the code, you know exterior lighting in the IECC model code is divided into 4 zones, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We don't actually have any Zone 4 areas in Vermont. Zone 4 is really for major metropolises like New York City, Boston type of areas. So Zone 4 has been removed, which is new. We used to have that in the 2015 CBES. But it didn't apply to us. And the most common ones you're going to see is probably Zone 3 and probably some Zone 2. Zone 1 is more for state parks, forested areas, so probably not a whole lot of new construction going on in those areas, but I'm going to highlight Zone 3, which is in a developed commercial district. Zone 2 is primarily residential with some mixed commercial in it. This will focus on Zone 3 in this training. You can look at Zone 2 and 1 in the model and the proposed code that's up on the GPS's website. So same format, the current code in the first column, the model code in the middle, and the proposed in the right. The ones I would pay the most attention to are probably this parking area and drives, and you can see it's been cut in half from the 2015 to the 2019 CBES in terms of watts per square foot. I will also note there are a couple new areas on this table that weren't specified in 2015 CBES. Exterior dining areas and landscaping areas now have their own requirements. And here are some more exterior spaces. Again, this is Zone 3. Maybe we'll focus on the main entries and other doors. It used to be 30 watts per linear foot in the current code, and 20 watt per linear foot on a non-main entry. Now all door entries are 15 watts per linear foot. Again, a new category here. Loading docks is now specified. Here we have building facades, ATM machines, gatehouse entrances. You'll notice that facades have not changed from the current code, while some of these others have moved down some. Some other spaces here, loading areas for law enforcement, etc. Drive-up windows and doors, that has been cut in half. Parking near 24-hour retail entrances has been cut in half. Okay, that concludes our lighting power density overview. We will now go into lighting controls. Lighting controls. There's a new section for manual controls. Manual controls shall comply with, they should be in a location ready to access to occupants, and they should be located where the control lights are visible, or shall identify the area served by the lights and indicate their status. So you can't have a switch where you can't see what their status is. Occupancy sensor control function. Really, almost no change here. The main change is that they need to, instead of having 30 minutes before they have to turn off lights, now it's 20 minutes. So they have to turn off sooner. You always could have done it more sooner, but now it's at least 20 minutes, if not sooner than that. A new section, a new requirement for occupancy sensors. This actually came from IECC. It's not a Vermont specific one. But if you have an open area office, now occupancy sensor controls are required if it's over 300 square feet. They have to be configured so that the general lighting can be controlled separately in controlled zones not greater than 600 square feet. So you can't have one occupancy control controlling, say, 1,000 square feet. You have to break it up into smaller lighting zones. The controls need to turn off within 20 minutes. They have to be configured so that general lighting power in each zone is reduced by not less than 80% of the full lighting power, and has to be in a reasonably uniform pattern. So it doesn't have to go off, but it has to go significantly down. The controls should be configured that any daylight responsive control will activate open plan office space general lighting or control zone general lighting only when the occupancy for the same area is detected. A new section for egress lighting controls. Luminaries providing means of egress illumination, where the means of egress shall be illuminated at all times. The room where space is occupied shall be controlled by occupancy sensors or a signal from another building control system. And automatically reduces lighting power by at least 50% when not occupied for at least 15 minutes. So this is not emergency lighting that only comes on in an emergency. This is lights that are on in hallways, in stairways. You know, they don't need to go off, but they need to go to at least half power when unoccupied. There are exceptions for this. If the space by space, you're not exceeding 50% of the space by space for the egress area, you don't need to have this control on that. Or if you don't have much egress illumination in your building, so it doesn't exceed 0.02 watts per square foot of total building area. So if your egress lighting, your lighting in the egress spaces does not exceed 0.02 watts per total building area, then you are exempt from this requirement, and obviously emergency lighting by the NFPA is exempt as well. This is another IECC added change. There were 5 requirements already in our current code. If you are doing daylight control functioning, you know how it's being controlled. Now there are 3 more requirements. So time delay circuits, so you don't have cycling. The maximum area of a control space is 2,500 square feet. And occupant override capability of daylight dimming controls is not permitted other than a reduction of light level from the level established by the controls. Daylight control dimming, so daylight responsive controls shall be configured to automatically reduce the power of general lighting in the daylight zone in response to available daylight while maintaining uniform illumination. It has to be either continuous dimming, and the system should reduce lighting power continuously to less than 15% of the rated maximum. Or you can use step dimming using multi-level switching and daylight sensor controls. If you're using step dimming, it has to be a minimum of 2 steps of uniform illumination between 0 and 100. So 0, 33%, 67%, 100% would be acceptable. Each step should be in equal increments of power, plus or minus 10%. General lighting with daylight zones in offices, classrooms, laboratories, and reading rooms shall use the continuous dimming method, and step dimming is not allowed as a mean in those spaces. So in exterior lighting controls, if you have an exterior time switch control function, so in our current code we say that, you know, if you lose power, it will retain the programming for at least 10 hours. That is still a requirement in the 2019 CBES, but we also have 3 other requirements. That one, that they have a clock capable of being programmed for not fewer than 7 days. They should be capable of being set for 7 different day types per week. So it has to have the capability, whether you set it that way or not, to have each day of the week have a different time switch control setting, and they should incorporate an automatic holiday setback feature. So these are the new requirements on those. A new thing on gas lighting. I'm sure this will hit most of your buildings. Gas-fired lighting appliances shall not be equipped with a continuous pilot, in case you have gas lighting anywhere. Electrical transformers. The single-phase transformers are unchanged, but the 3-phase has been updated. You can see the old numbers in the 2015 CBES crossed out and the new numbers in the red over there. So incremental step up to higher efficiency requirements on the 3-phase transformer. I didn't do the same here with the electrical motors. There were just too many numbers to focus on, but there were minor changes to the efficiency requirements for general service motors. I would look at the 2019 proposed CBES to see what those new numbers are. Nothing dramatic, but there were an incremental notch up. There's a new requirement on voltage drop in feeders and branch circuits, such that the total drop between feeders and branch circuits shall not exceed 5%. And then at the end of the electric power and lighting section C405 is a section on electric vehicle charging stations. So this is the major change here. So parking spots shall have a socket capable of providing the required level 1 or level 2 within 5 feet of the center line. To recap, level 1 is basically your residential outlet, 120 volts, regular residential type outlet. Level 2 is a 220 volt faster charger station that you'll see many people install in their homes. If they have a electric car at home, it allows for a faster charge, similar to an outlet for like electric clothes dryer. I should point out that a few things about this table, because it can be a little confusing, and in retrospect perhaps it could have been laid out a little more logically. This is the numbers being presented are, first of all, they're divided into whether or not you have less than 25 parking spaces at your building, or 25 or greater than or equal to 25. If it's less than 25, here are your numbers over here. and it's by building type. And these building types, maybe we should go over those first. Group A is assembly, so kind of like your government buildings. M is mercantile, so retail type spaces. B is business, so that would include office spaces. E is educational purposes through the 12th grade. F is for kind of industrial factory, disassembly, fabricating, finishing, manufacturing type buildings. H is basically the same as F, but in areas that constitute a physical or health hazard. I is institutional. R4 is occupancies for more than 5, but not more than 16 persons who reside on a 24-hour basis in a supervised care. R1 are basically your hotels, motels, and R2 are mostly multifamily, but also has dormitories, fraternities, sororities, vacation timeshare type spaces. So you'll see some of these over here. If you're not in one of these building types, then there are no requirements for you. So back here, if you have less than 25, if your group's A and M, no requirement at all, but one level 1 and one level 2, both are required, one level 1 and one level 2 if you're in one of these groups and you have less than 25, and so on and so forth. If there's 25 or more spots, you have the option of either option A or option B. And if you're trying to minimize the requirement, usually option A will be better when you first hit 25 and start going higher and higher. But eventually you'll get to a point where once it gets to be a pretty large parking lot, option B might have a less of a requirement, and you can choose whichever one is better for you. I should point out all these numbers include ones that actually have the charging station and ones that are shall we say EV ready, electric vehicle ready. So basically you take this number and you cut it in half. So 50% of the parking spaces, rounded up to the nearest whole number, shall have electric vehicle supply equipment, or basically a charging station ready to go. The remainder shall be pre-wired to allow for installations at such time as they're needed. So basically, run the conduit and have space so you can add them to in the future. So, if for instance, I have an office building with or actually, let's say I've got a hotel motel, and I've got 100 parking spaces in that hotel or motel. So hotel motel, we go to group R1. We have the option of doing option A or option B. So if I had 100 parking spaces, I wouldn't have to put in any level 1, but I would have to put in 2 level 2. So that would be option A. So is option A better than option B? Option B, I would have to put in 10 level 2 plus 1 level 1. So in this case, I would choose option A. I would need 2 parking spaces that are level 2, but hold on, only 50% of the parking spaces actually have to have the equipment in it. The rest are EV ready. So I would only have to put 1 parking space that has the EVSE or electric vehicle charging station, and then 1 other space would have to be electric vehicle ready for us to add it at a future date if we so wanted to. So that's how the math would work for this one. I should also note that if you have a standalone retail, not part of a strip mall, not part of some larger retail space, you have standalone retail, and you have 49 or less parking spaces, then you don't have any requirement for this. There is no electrical vehicle requirement. Additionally, the code says that parking spaces with the EVSE, so not the ones that are EV ready, but just the ones that already have the charging station, have to be marked for electrical vehicle use only. There are two exceptions to that. If you're in a group R2, which again is mostly multifamily, the number of parking spaces. Now these exceptions do not change the number of charging stations. These exceptions only talk about whether you have to put a sign that says the parking is only for electrical vehicles. So there's an exception if you're in a multifamily. If the number of occupants that are in the building does not, so the parking spaces that have to be marked for EV use only do not have to exceed the number of EV cars driven by occupants of the building. So if you, say, had 4 EV parking spaces and they're only, and of all the occupants living in your multifamily building, only 2 of them there are only 2 EV cars, then you only have to have 2 spaces that are marked for EV parking only. You still have to have 4 chargers, but only 2 of them have to be marked as EV only. Similarly, in a structured parking lot, like a multi-level parking lot, only half of the parking spaces rounded up with EVSE shall be marked for EV use only. So again, let's say we had 5 EV parking station EVSEs in a multi-level parking structure. Only 3 of them would have to be marked for EV use only in that case, and the other 2 could be used by any car if you so wanted to do that. Again, it doesn't change the number of EVSE spaces, just the signage. Okay, we already ran over those definitions. That brings us to the end of 405, but before you go, there is an important section I want to bring your attention to, which is C406 Additional Efficiency Package Options, which has been in the code, it is in the current code, the 2015 CBES, although the section C406 has been changed fairly significantly. There is in section 405 the upfront, the electrical power and lighting section. There will be a reminder to look to section C406. It says, in addition to the electrical lighting requirements of 405, you may need the requirements of 406. So the way 406 works is there's a menu. You have to do more than what the prescriptive code requires in 402 through 405, which covers the envelope, mechanical, hot water, and electrical lighting sections. Those are the prescriptive sections, but you also have to go beyond that with its additional efficiency package options. And you have to pick, you have flexibility on section 406 on which ones you go after. There is a point requirement, and the ones you go after may involve lighting, they may involve electrical systems. So if you're an electrical designer, you need to be aware of section 406, and you need to be in communication with the rest of the design team, the architect, the general contractor, as to how the building is meeting 406 and if any of those impact electrical and lighting systems. So as I said before, you have to get points. The points you have to get is 6 points. And you get to choose from the following options, which include envelope, mechanical things, but there's also some lighting and electrical stuff. I'm just going to go over the electrical and lighting stuff in this training. Here's a chart of the point allowances. So you'll see, let's say we have an office building. If you do better with your interior lighting power density than what's required in 405, depending on how much better you do, you can get 3 to 5 points of your 6 right there in lighting power density if you were in an office building. But it does depend on your building type. If you're in an educational building, you will get the same. You will also get the same in mercantile. But if you're not in one of the groups listed here, or let's say you're in a multifamily building, you wouldn't get as much points. Or if you were in another building not listed in these 5 columns, you would get 2 to 4 points for those same measures. There's also lighting controls. There's also renewable energy, which I'll call an electrical system. And there's also controlled receptacles, so we'll cover those 4 topics. Building group definitions, again, here, if you want a refresher on what R1, R2, B, E, and M are. But here we go. Reduce lighting power. In the current 2015 typo there, it should say CBES. In the 2015 CBES required a 10% improvement, or 10% less lighting power density. 2019 CBES, you have option 1 where you're 10% better than the lighting power density requirement, or option 2 for 20%. So again, remember there was 3 or 5 points. So if you did 10% better than the LPD in 405, you would get 3 points. If you do 20% better, you get 5 points. To get points here, you have to comply with sections 4631 or 4632, but in either case, your dwelling units and sleeping units have to comply with 4633, which basically said, if you remember, section 405 required 90% of lamps or fixtures shall be high efficacy. Here, now you have to bring that up to 95%. And then you have the option 1 or 2 for the rest of the building, outside of the dwelling and sleeping units. You have to bring the lighting power density 10 or 20% better than what was required by code to get additional points. Enhanced lighting controls. This really has not changed from the 2015 CB, so I really won't talk to this much. If you want to read through this, please pause this recording and you can read the details. But this is, other than minor editing, wording changes, wordsmithing, this is pretty much the same as it was in 2015 CBs. And you could get some points there. On-site renewable energy, this is new to 2019 CBs. It wasn't an option in 2015, so more options are good things. Depending on the type of building you have, you need to provide on-site renewable energy systems with a total system rating per square foot of conditioned floor area of the building of not less than the value specified in 406.5, which I give you here. You have to, whether your units are, you can choose to use the column for kBTUs per year or kilowatt hours per year. But this is the amount of per square foot how much you would have to provide to get the points for on-site renewable energy, depending on your building type. And then the last of the options in 406 that are under electric power and lighting is these controlled receptacles. The idea here is that as our energy code becomes more and more stringent, our plug loads become a bigger portion of our building energy use. This is a preliminary attempt at trying to make plug loads more efficient. And what this requires, if you want to go after this option, is putting 50% of your outlets, your electrical outlets, into a controlled function, and that control receptacle should be visibly differentiated from standard receptacles and should be controlled by one of the following devices: either an occupancy sensor that turns off after 20 minutes, the receptacle, or a time of day operated control device that turns receptacle power off at specific program times, programmed separately for each day of the week. So that would allow you to get the points on those. So that is this training and presentation. Again, my name is Keith Downs. Thank you for being part of this training. If you have more questions, you can go to the public service website, which I gave at the beginning, but again here, or if you have specific questions, you can email the public service department. Or if any logistical comments or questions, you can go to Energy Future Groups, who was the prime contractor on this effort, and you can reach them at info@energyfuturegroups.com or call Gabrielle Stebbins at the following number. And again, thank you for attending this training. I hope you found it informative. Good day.